It's disgusting. I don't want to talk about it. No, it's too disgusting.
So Clinton is expected to speak at an event coming up in Iowa. You're looking live right there. It's going to happen in roughly about 15 minutes, but don't expect her to respond to Trump's latest barbs. This morning, her communications director tweeted, quote, "We are not responding to Trump, but everyone who understands the humiliation this degrading language inflicts on all women should hashtag I'm with her." We have our reporters fanning out across this story, our political team, about this growing feud. And let's begin with MSNBC political correspondent Casey Hunt. Casey, let's talk about the reaction that this crude comment has gotten.
Well, Thomas, it's a little bit difficult to say exactly. You obviously showed Jennifer Palmieri there not responding to these comments from Donald Trump. He, of course, alluded to the male anatomy in quite a vulgar way at a Grand Rapids, Michigan rally last night. We want to play those comments for you unedited, just so you can see the context.
I may win, I may not win. Hillary, that's not a president. She's not taking us to everything that's been involved in Hillary has been losses. You take a look, even a race to Obama, she was going to beat Obama. I don't know who'd be worse. I don't know. How does it get worse? But she was going to beat, she was favored to win, and she got schlonged. She lost. She lost.
So there you have it, a new twist on Donald Trump's attacking someone as a loser, which he has done frequently. We haven't seen this kind of language used very often. I will say, Thomas, Hillary Clinton's campaign has been much more aggressive in responding to things that they perceive to be sexist during this time around, as opposed to how she tended to handle things in 2008. But as we saw there with the Palmieri tweet, she urging others who recognize what they called the humiliating nature of this remark to step up and say something instead of having Hillary Clinton do it herself. Thomas.
All right, Casey Hunt reporting from D.C. Casey, great to see you. Thank you.
Nice to see you.
I want to bring in now MSNBC host, political correspondent Steve Kornacki. And Steve, in the midst of all of this, we see Trump continuing to lead in a new poll.
That's right, Thomas. New Quinnipiac national numbers out just this morning on the Republican side. You can look at this. Trump in first place there, 28%. But really the other headline of this poll, maybe the bigger headline, look at there in second place, just 4 points behind him, Ted Cruz. And, of course, last week, right before that Republican debate, right after Donald Trump had made those controversial comments about banning Muslims from coming into the United States, he was at or near 40% in 3 different national polls. His lead was over 20% over Ted Cruz in 3 different national polls. So, yes, Trump is in first in this new poll today, but if this indicates maybe a return to earth of sorts after the debate, after those Muslim comments started to sink in a little bit, could be a concerning sign for Donald Trump. Also, talking about the comments he made last night, obviously not just Hillary Clinton who's being asked to respond to them today, Trump's fellow Republicans being asked the same question. Here was Ted Cruz. Here's how he handled it.
I did think it was interesting that Donald Trump said a couple of days ago that he thinks this race will come down to him and me. I think Donald may well be right. I think it could easily end up being a 2-man race between Donald Trump and me. And I think that presents a good choice to the American people.
And, Thomas, that obviously, I think, is what Cruz wants. His strategy here all along, we've seen it, is not to say anything negative about Donald Trump, not to attack him in situations like this where everybody's looking to him to say something critical about Donald Trump. He's not going to do it. And really, the strategy here is sort of a soft takeover strategy. Let Donald Trump say these things, like he said last night, and let Republicans, hope that Republicans will ultimately come to the conclusion that they like Donald Trump, but maybe this just isn't presidential enough. And then those same Republicans will look to Ted Cruz. That's his strategy, at least.
All right, so we continue to watch him kind of coast in the wins behind Donald Trump and within the margin of error. That's an important thing to talk about, too, with that new poll. So basically, they could be tied here, Steve. Thank you, sir, and our thanks to Casey Hunt as well. I want to bring in former RNC chairman and current MSNBC political analyst Michael Steele. Michael, good to see you.
Hey, man, good to see you.
All right, so I got to ask you, what do you make of these latest Trump comments? I mean, is this from the Department of Who Cares, or is it more a bigger problem for the Republican Party and a disservice of saying things like that by the lead candidate?
Well, I think it's more in the department of who cares, and I don't want to say that in the sense of dismissing it. I think it's just, I think right now a lot of the base voters have sort of baked in their attitudes and their views about what Donald Trump is, what Donald Trump says, and for the most part, and you've run the litany before, Thomas, they like it. That doesn't bother them. They see it as fight. They see it as, healthy bluster, if you will. And the fact that it's, it nicks at the Clinton campaign, all the better. So, I don't think people will take away, walk away with a great offense from this because they see this now as how you engage with Donald Trump and what happens when you engage with Donald Trump.
At what point, though, do folks within the GOP and the party itself think that this type of language or this type of reflection of who they want to be president, this language doesn't serve them?
That's a good question. I don't know where that point is at this point. I mean, you go back over the litany of comments that have gone after groups and individuals from the very beginning of the campaign. The party leadership has been, sort of tiptoeing on eggshells in dealing with that. The base is eating it up. Yeah. The general population is kind of looking at it and sort of scratching their head going, is there someone there who can control this? So I don't see that. I don't see this having that kind of impact. This is not that kind of election. And I think we're well beyond that at this point where people look at this through those traditional lenses. This is an asymmetrical race for the presidency that Donald Trump is leading. Now, to the point that you were just speaking to with Casey Steve, thank you. On Steve is what you see Ted Cruz doing. Cruz is moving very slowly, very carefully into this space, and to sort of get that residual. Well, people may not outwardly say we don't want Trump. They feel they have a second choice, and that's clearly now being reflected in the polls.
All right, so who do you think, though, benefits mostly from this feud of a Trump-Clinton? Is it someone that's stealth, like a Cruz, who kind of veers up in the tailwinds?
Yeah, I think so. I think Cruz right now, in terms of a national narrative relative to Donald Trump, is positioned the best to take advantage of that. As you see the head-to-head that Donald has either with Hillary Clinton or some other candidate inside the party, Cruz has positioned his operation, I think, the best right now. But keep an eye on someone like a Chris Christie, who's making good moves and headstrong moves in a state like New Hampshire, where he can gain momentum in that narrative as well. So I think, right now Cruz is in the catbird seat. He's in that position to best gobble up that support, particularly if Trump hits a speed bump on his way to the nomination with comments like this.
All right, so we look at this poll from Quinnipiac. It shows Donald Trump in the lead. We add up the other percentages, Cruz and Carson. It brings it up to 62%, and this is the combo of establishment and outsider. But also within that poll, and if we could advance to the next graphic to show that 50% of respondents from this poll say they would also be embarrassed to have Donald Trump as president. So how do we, mesh this all together? That he leads, but people would be embarrassed for him to hold the White House.
Well, there is the rub. I mean, this is what I was saying before. This is not your typical presidential campaign where people are sitting up there saying, "Gee, I like what this guy is saying. He makes, he's saying what I feel." And if they ask him if he should be, if you're going to vote for him, they say yes. But then the next question, would you be embarrassed to have him as president? Yes. It makes no sense. Which, again, going back to Cruz, is why he's positioning himself, because what he's counting on is that come February, when the voting starts, people will come to their senses. And in doing so, that 50% will take over. Those people are saying, I don't want him as president. And guess who's standing there as the best alternative for them? Ted Cruz.
Patience is a virtue right now.
It
As
is.
always, Michael Steele. Thank you, Michael. Great to see you.
All right.
Back here at home, Hillary Clinton speaking right now. Let's show you at a town hall in Iowa. I think she's being introduced. This is her first public event since Donald Trump used a pretty vulgar comment about her at a rally he was holding last night. Now, Clinton's campaign has already come out saying they're not really going to respond to Trump's remarks, but we're going to keep our eye on it nonetheless. They're saying people can make their minds up for themselves. Joining me now, Chris Matthews, host of MSNBC's Hardball. So, Chris, as we watch this, and as you point out, we talk about what Donald Trump says. We never talk about his policies, just what comes out of his mouth. But he's got this way of words that would torpedo any regular candidate. So why is Trump able to get a pass from likely GOP voters?
I wouldn't call it a pass, and he's going to pay for this. And I think Hillary Clinton's people will be brilliant at exploiting it, and they should. Why not? Hit him for when he makes mistakes like this, and grossities, if you will. It shows something about his soul, his character when he uses language like this. But anyway, I think the reason Trump has done well is not because he uses gross language or he's macho or he's sexist. Those are the things that get in the way of his success. He's been successful because the political establishment in this country has failed in the eyes of so many people to achieve any kind of success on illegal immigration, on trade, on even deciding what wars to go into. They don't seem to be doing the right thing by most working people. We keep losing industrial jobs. We keep going into stupid wars, and nobody does anything about illegal immigration. They come up with new phrases for it, like undocumented workers, but nobody deals with the situation. So I think he's got something there in terms of nationalism, economic nationalism, particularly people don't think they're being looked out for. And Trump talks to those people. He talks to them in a way that Hillary and none of the other politicians do. He talks about their plight, about how they've been betrayed in their eyes. And I think he's been very effective. So people probably say, yeah, he's not perfect, he's not a gentleman, but, he's taken on this system in a way that none of these other guys are.
Meanwhile, he also took a shot at journalists last night. This is in reference to Vladimir Putin. Take a look.
That is shtick, Thomas. You know that. It's just...
By the way, I hate some of these people, but I'd never kill them. I hate them. No, these people, honestly, I'll be honest. I would never kill them. I would never do that. Let's see. No, I wouldn't. I would never kill them. But I do hate them. And some of them are such lying, disgusting people. It's true. It's true. It's true. But I would never kill them. And anybody that does, I think it would be despicable.
All right, so comedian-in-chief, Chris, goes to
it's
Trump.
Like
but
a comedian.
It works. The media is
Nobody
a foil.
said he would. Nobody thinks he would. He's taken something. He lives off the land. He finds things like Putin may kill people. If somebody argues he did, fine. We can see if that's true. But the fact that he'll just find something like that along the ground, and he'll be talking about that for days and making a whole thing out of it. His comparison to Vladimir Putin. I mean, he finds things every day or two that are brand new in terms of the conversation, and he puts on a show.
All right,
and the audience loves it.
Speaking of a show, you're putting on one tonight about Citizen Trump. I just want to play a clip for everybody. Give a preview. Take
Thanks,
a look.
Thomas. Closer to home, actually across the street from his home, the Woolman skating rink in Central Park had been closed for years. It's 1986.
They had spent over $20 million over a 7-year period. And then finally, I said, this is ridiculous. This thing shouldn't take years to build. And I was able to convince everybody to let me build it.
Donald, as the gifted self-promoter, went out there and pitched this as I got the project done that the New York City government couldn't get done.
I think you see the same instinct coming out now that you did with the Woolman rink, with Trump being frustrated at how inept and useless government is and jumping in and saying, I'm going to fix this.
All right, so Chris, what is your biggest takeaway, the thing that surprised you most in the research of putting together this documentary?
With all the BS and bad language that we talk about, we always talk about what Trump said 10 minutes ago. That's what we get obsessed with. Serial marriages, bankruptcies, the whole mess. We know it all. It's very much like Citizen Kane, the movie about the newspaper baron, all kinds of problems in his life. And yet, this is something that you got to deal with. He's generally successful at his business, and he gets it done. I was walking down Fifth Avenue the other night with my son Thomas, and I looked up, and there was Trump Tower. It may not be the prettiest building, and it may be too tall and too gross for Fifth Avenue because of what was there before, Bonwood Tower. And we talk about that in the movie, in the doc. But it got done. You have to deal with the labor unions. You have to deal with the mob. You got to deal with city council people that have councilmanic privilege. You got to deal with all this stuff. And year after year, building after building, he gets it done. He's a builder, and he has product to show for it. And I think that's something we have to deal with. Is he effective when it matters to him? That's one factor. Put that on the table. Should he be president of the United States? Well, that's a question for the public. But what I think will come out of it tonight is going to say, this is a interesting American character here, with a lot of the American character traits we don't like, but a lot of the American character traits we recognize in a big mouth guy like him.
Chris Matthews, we look forward to it tonight. Thank you very much, sir. It is called Citizen Trump. We will see it at 7 p.m. And we've been taking your pulse today on our question that we put out there about Donald Trump's controversial statements about Hillary Clinton, whether or not he's gone too far with this vulgar rhetoric. Let's take a look at what the pulse is saying so far and see your reactions. And currently, right now, as we look at the Bing Pulse, 81% say, yeah, he has gone too far, where the rest of you... Welcome back, everybody. We've got no personal response to Donald Trump yet from Hillary Clinton. This is a live look at her event in Iowa. We had her communications director tweeting out this morning that they wouldn't be responding to the GOP frontrunner. Now, Donald Trump has been receiving a lot of criticism today and a lot of attention over his vulgar, crude remark about the former Secretary of State at the rally held last night for him in Michigan. And joining me now is Rick Pluta, a reporter with the Michigan Public Radio Network, and he was at that rally last night. So, Rick, what's been the reaction on the ground? We saw the applause within that audience that came out to see him, but throughout Michigan, what's been the reaction to what Trump said last night?
Well, I guess a couple of things. In terms of those things directly, kind of bafflement. As a matter of fact, when I first heard it, I wasn't sure that I heard it correctly. I had to go back and listen again. It was in the context of right after saying that Hillary Clinton had been doing something disgusting during the break during the Democratic debate, and then it went into that. And I think we all kind of looked at each other and said, did he just say that, and what did it mean? So, in a word, I would say bafflement. Michigan also reacting to some of the more protectionist things that Donald Trump said during the speech as well, that he would impose super tariffs, 35% tax on imports if car companies build plants in Mexico and overseas and stuff like that. That certainly resonated here.
Was there more policy talk like that, or was it just a lot more rhetoric about Hillary Clinton, bathroom breaks, even talking about journalists?
When you're dealing with Donald Trump, for good or for ill, just the incendiary rhetoric just seems to pardon the expression, trump all else. And so that was kind of the discussion. Did he really mean that? Did even the talk about saying he would never kill a reporter, and then stopped and seemed to reconsider his position for for a moment, that those sort of theatrics kind of take over the event, and certainly while it's discussed differently in venues like this and the outer world, I mean, the room just loved it.
And so, Rick, are they enamored by his policy or his celebrity?
My sense from talking to people is they are enamored by the fact that he seems to say whatever comes into his head at any given moment, which seems to be a big part of the reason why Donald Trump is incapable of suffering for any of the things that he says that would seemingly damage most other politicians.
Yeah, a missing filter. But it works. Rick Pluta from Michigan Public Radio Network. Rick, thank you, sir. I appreciate your time.
A pleasure.
I want to bring in now Mark Halpern, managing editor for Bloomberg Politics, a man who knows filters well. Mark, let me ask you about this. Trump benefiting from going after Hillary Clinton. He's saying, the heck with the primary. I'm just going to go right after who I think is going to be in the general with me.
I think he does benefit from it, Thomas, because one of the things the Republican nominating voters are looking for in a candidate is who's going to be a warrior and go up against Hillary Clinton, who will be tough to beat in a general election. And it also, I think, blocks out anybody else from getting much attention. And I think Trump does his best when he's taking people down. And I think one of the weaknesses in his candidacy as we get towards February is some voters might say, you know what, he's not doing as well in head-to-head polls against Hillary Clinton as some of his rivals like Marco Rubio. Even Ben Carson, for a time, has done better against Clinton. And I think if Trump keeps this up, he may start to do better in those head-to-heads, and that could be a key issue for a lot of voters.
All right, so Mark, when it comes to Donald Trump having the upper hand, he kind of had it for a minute because of Hillary Clinton talking about Donald Trump's comments being used by ISIS to recruit or use as propaganda. He demanded this apology from her, and then he goes off to say what he said last night. It's kind of changed the narrative of what we're talking about. Now we've got the Clinton communications director saying that they're not going to talk about this. But wouldn't this be easy bait for Hillary Clinton to go after something like this and kind of shake off the apology issue from Donald Trump and just talk about misogyny or sexism?
Yeah, look, both of them, I think, might want to reflect on how they behaved in the last couple of days. I don't quite get why Hillary Clinton felt she needed to go further than the facts seem to support on this question of whether there's ISIS recruiting videos featuring Donald Trump. There's no evidence for that, and I think she'll probably eventually have to walk that back, although her campaign hasn't yet. Donald Trump used language that is going to bother a lot of people, but I suspect it will not bother most of his supporters because they like the fact that he sometimes says things that most politicians won't say. And I would say, Thomas, that this is something, what he said last night, that most politicians would not say in public.
Well, yeah, I don't think so, because anything that Donald Trump says, it's not like a regular person saying it. I mean, it would typically torpedo anybody else. But do you think, Mark, that these supporters actually turn into primary voters, or these are just folks that are enamored with the Trump hysteria?
Well, look, there's two ways to evaluate those Trump supporters and whether they'll be voters. One is whether his campaign is building the mechanics to turn people out, so-called field operation, particularly in those early states. I think there's evidence, probably more than some of the recent articles suggest, that they are building that kind of operation. And then second, just are these the kind of people who are going to be inclined to caucus or vote in a primary, just in general, whether the campaign reaches out to them or not? The Trump supporters I meet are pretty aware of when the elections are and are pretty interested in voting for him to try to change the country. So I think right now, those people who are hoping that Trump fails because he's got fans but not voters are maybe hoping more than they should be and wishing and hoping, counting too much on that reality rather than trying to beat him.
Mark Halperin.